Hello and welcome back to another episode of From the Field. And don't we have a great one today? We got Zuru on, is going to go through their data journey, which is going to be awesome. And hello, Jazra Aaron. Oh my God, I'm terrible with names. So because this, I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand, Nero based in Auckland, anything like that. I think the biggest news we have is that we just ran Cloud Days 2 days ago, which was a awesome and massive event. I think the absolute energy for that was absolutely buzzing. Managed to get up on stage and realize just how blinding those damn lights are. And it's just almost like you're under interrogation the whole entire time. But it was awesome to do. So Nero, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi to everyone out there today. My name's Nero. I'm a senior solutions architect here at AWS based in New Zealand in Auckland, like Casey said. And I work with a number of our customers across New Zealand, supporting them on their cloud journey. And Zuru, where Luke here works, is one of them. So Luke, do you want to do a bit of intro yourself as well?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, my name's Luke Hartfield. I am a data scientist working over at Zuru, primarily within the marketing or the digital space. But yeah, it's quite an exciting company. We were originally a toy company. We was just started out as like a little homegrown New Zealand business, founded by two brothers, Nick and Matt. Basically started out like making, these pretty awful toys out of a shed on their parents' property and just going door to door and selling, trying to make some money as a kid. And then as teenagers, they kind of thought, let's give this a proper shot. Let's take on the big boys. And they basically, with next to no money, went over to China, not really with a plan, to set up some factories and to make some toys. And fast forward to today, we're a multi-billion-dollar company, multinational company. We've got some toys that people might recognize, like a bunch of balloons, or like mini brands. There's some of the top toys. And we're now expanding into the CPG space, so consumer goods and stuff like that. Only within the last few years, but we've got some big brands like Monday Hair Care. One that I think is really, really cool is Bonkers cat treats and dog treats. Pretty exciting marketing going on there. But yeah, it's pretty exciting company to be part of. There was, it's despite being quite big, it's quite a startup mentality, and we kind of keep that hustle going. I think now we're at like 5,000 or so employees across just about every country you can imagine, New Zealand, USA, Italy, India, but yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I've got to say, one of the most interesting things with working with you and Zuru is just the pace you guys work at, and it's quite reflective of how we work as well. So it's been an amazing journey learning about some of the different verticals that you do, and all those different products really just really does, I think, highlight what we're going to talk about today a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, hello, Isaac. So I would say, how long has Zuru been on this data journey, Luke?
That's kind of the crazy thing. We've really gotten to this stage with very little data. A lot of it's really been based off just some really talented people and doing what they think is going to work. It's wild. So like, even if I look back to when I started at Zuru, which was about a year ago, we were basically just based off spreadsheets. That was our database, basically. It was like, I remember the first day coming in and being like, well, where can I get the sales data for this brand? And the answer was, oh, well, I think, so-and-so might have the latest copy of that, or, and it's just crazy to see, how far we've come since then. The company is definitely kind of investing a lot in data at the moment. They definitely see that is where the potential is, and that's where we're kind of, if we want to get to that next level, that's where we're going to have to start investing, our time and our money and stuff like that.
It's really crazy how much spreadsheets like run the world.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild.
Yeah, and it's interesting trying to shift from using spreadsheets, because they can be a powerful tool, right? And it definitely has its place. And so, it has been quite exciting to get those foundations going for you guys, and then seeing what you're doing with it, which is really what we want to talk a little bit about today, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I thought one thing that would be great to chat through, Luke, is just talking about some of that simple architecture that you guys have embraced on AWS to start forming those foundations, and how it's helped, how it's been for you to use it. And then let's dive in a little bit. I was thinking, Casey, I could actually show our viewers a bit of a demo on how it kind of works as well. Right, so you got it up on the screen there. So yeah, really today's topic is how a very simple data architecture can be quite powerful, especially in the analytics space. And I guess if I narrate this a little bit, Luke, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. What we worked with, Zuru and Luke specifically, we started looking at how we can bring marketing data and sales data from a number of sources, using third-party connectors, and just really building that concept of a data lake using AWS, Amazon S3. We started storing that raw data and then using AWS Glue in this case to process it and find what's in there really quickly. And then Amazon Athena to query it interactively, so that Luke and the team could actually understand what that sales and marketing data was, what they could do with it, without basically investing a lot of time building pipelines, etc. Now that's my viewpoint on it. I wanted to leave it there and really just hear from Luke, like, what's your experience been here? What's your, if you walk through the step by step, give us the lowdown.
I mean, it was quite a quick and easy win, to be honest, coming from pretty much nothing to this. It's been a bit of a journey. So I guess to run through at like kind of a high level of what we're doing here, we have a lot of marketing data. We are a very digital focused business. Marketing is kind of our bread and butter. So we've got loads and loads of sources. We're talking, Facebook, Google, TikTok, the main ones. And then we've got Amazon ads and stuff like that. So we wanted to bring all of that into one place that we could kind of visualize and run analysis on and stuff like that. But we also wanted to be able to compare that to our sales data. Basically, so we could actually see how, we know that marketing has a big impact on sales and stuff like that. But it's kind of a different kind of question to answer. It's not that easy. So we kind of wanted to get like a proper view of how our marketing is actually affecting sales and stuff like that. So we've started bringing in our sales data, and the company is mainly B2B. So we sell into retailers, the Targets, the Walmarts and stuff like that. I don't know how many we actually sell into, but it's probably hundreds. It's staggering how many. And these aren't like, we don't own that data, right? So we have to essentially get access to that data from those retailers directly. So you're trying to manage, let's say 50 different connections from 50 different retailers and stuff like that. It's pretty challenging. So we use third-party connectors basically to manage all of our APIs and stuff like that. there's loads of them out there. We use kind of a mix of a few for different things. But basically, we use these connectors to pull the data out of those systems directly, from Walmart or from Facebook and stuff like that. They handle all the heavy lifting and stuff like that. We then feed it into S3 as raw data. And from there, we use Glue to basically transform it, merge it together, marry it up so that it's nice and clean and usable. Basically, to whatever story we want to tell, we create a new data set for that specifically. And then from there, we build these Athena tables, and we use queries to feed that into BI tools like Tableau and Power BI and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. I wanted to kind of just highlight that journey though, because you make it sound really easy, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's a process for sure.
Yeah, and I think something that's really important to understand with some of these marketing data files and sales data files, which I'm just going to pop up a spreadsheet just showing one data source here. Are you guys seeing that? Yep, cool.
Yep.
So this is an example of some data from Facebook as an example, right? And we're talking about, a source that has, let's see, how many is in here? 133 columns, right? And so this can be quite challenging to import and create pipeline in the traditional sense of understanding what's in the file before you can even see it. So it was amazing watching what you guys did by just plunking this into a data lake and then running a Glue crawler to discover the data there, and how much time I guess that saved for you guys. But yeah, just really highlighting that and keen to understand, like, how did that go? Like, what? I mean, I make it sound easy. There's always challenges, right? Like, I'd love for you to tell the viewers, like, keep it real. Like, what are the challenges you still had to go through to get this in?
For sure. Yeah, the crazy thing is that they're not even like the columns aren't even standardized or anything. So what's called cost in one platform might be spend in another, and like they just don't match up cleanly and stuff like that. So that was a huge task, just kind of breaking down and matching all of those tables up to make like one master sheet basically. And essentially the way that we did it is, just explored it in Glue, got a real good feel for the data. We did have issues along the way, like originally we were feeding it in as CSV files for a few reasons. I mean, it's not, storage wise, it's pennies basically. It doesn't cost much, so there wasn't really any need to go, Parquet or anything at that point. And we just thought, CSV is simple, easy, let's just do that. But it was not simple and it was not easy for some reason. So we had some fields with like double quotes in them, basically. And it stumped me for the longest time why this data wasn't coming through properly. Like some, the fields were all mixed up and the values were all mixed up. And I just could not work out why it was not coming in perfectly. Like if I downloaded an Excel, clean as, perfect, ready to go. But in S3, it just wouldn't read properly. And it turns out that it was just, it was as simple as basically changing one little setting, basically telling it to recognize the double quotes and stuff like that. So, there's been little things like that have been annoyingly challenging, I guess.
Yeah.
But overall, it's been as smooth as it probably could be, I would say. Another issue that we have is with the bookmarks is we set up all the bookmarks and oh man, these are the bane of my existence. But a similar problem, they just wouldn't recognize the bookmark, and so every time that the Glue job would reprocess the data and stuff, the output would be blank, and I just could not work out what it was. And again, it was just one tiny little line of code that we had to take out, and it worked perfectly. So there were small problems, but yeah, interesting ones at that.
I want to dive into it a little bit for our viewers, because I think those are totally lessons that everyone can avoid, right? Because avoid in the sense because you've already been through it and we're telling them. So yeah. I don't know if you've come across this one, Casey, but basically CSV files, if you look at the RFC standard, allows for double quotes when you've got escape characters or something in there that you want to escape. If you have a CSV file where every field has double quotes in it, regardless of whether it needs to be escaped or not, that's straightforward to parse using the glue crawler, because we default to something called lazy serd in terms of finding out what content's in the file, and lazy serd can actually detect CSV, tab delimiter, JSON, etc. So it's a very generic one. However, it doesn't seem to quite understand if double quotes are only used in some cases. And our instructions, and you can find this in the guide, it says if you know that you're dealing with it, change the parser. And so it's an interesting kind of challenge, right? Because when you have to dive into the guide to find that one little thing, it did take Zuru a bit of time to get there, and unfortunate there. So we need to do, I think, a better job of putting that in front of customers when you first engage them and say, hey, if you're dealing with this kind of file, I think. So that was interesting. And a point to our viewers, right? If you're having that trouble, it's easy to fix, get in touch, etc.
And that's also the whole point of this show, is to like essentially share that pain and that learning through this channel is like a mass education channel.
Yeah. So the CSV parser can be quite important if you've got those kind of files. Have a look. The other thing was, I think, something I've used Glue for a long time. They obviously, Bison saying it, but big fan. I've done a lot of jobs prior to coming to AWS, etc. And this one caught me by surprise too. So if any of you guys are using notebooks to interactively create Glue jobs, one of the standard things to do in there is to effectively hard code at the top of your code some of the job parameters that you'll be using, because you don't want to deal with passing that in all the time when you're interactively dealing with it. One of the things that can get you, got me and Luke, right? So it's not just Luke, is if you have so the job name is typically passed into the Glue job as a parameter. And so that was hard coded at the top just for testing as part of the notebook. And then that got carried over. Now, bookmarks get stored against the job name. So effectively what we ended up with was multiple jobs with the same job name inside the code, all overriding each other in terms of bookmarks. And Luke could not for the life of him figure out why his files are getting reprocessed or not every time. So it caught me up by as well. And I think that's real talk, guys. That's something to be mindful of. Bookmarks are stored against the job name that is passed into the job and into the session, the Glue session under the Glue context. So yeah, really interesting stuff that once you get through, it gets a little bit easier. But look, I wanted to take a real quick time to show our viewers as well. If you can bring up my screen there, Casey. So what we've done in the marketing and analytics space with Zuru here is take that complex file as an example that we showed before, putting it into S3 in its raw form, then using what we're calling a Glue crawler. Now, a Glue crawler is basically a job that goes in and reads either the whole file or part of the file, depending on how you configure it, and discovers the schema inside of there. So you don't have to do that heavy lifting of understanding the schema, creating something, trying to import it. If some of the data types don't match, failing, etc. It's trying to take that cycle away from you and do it for you effectively. When you run the crawler, what it's doing is it's storing the metadata it finds about the schema. And then you're able to query that interactively using Athena, which is an interactive query tool using standard SQL. So in this case, what I've done is I've taken that file with 133 fields. I've simply put it into S3, run a crawler, and I can immediately start accessing that as tabular data. I've not had to create schemas. I've not had to deal with understanding if one of the fields in here is a string or an integer. It's done that for you for them. And I'm going to highlight for the most part, right? At the end of the day, if you do have a file that is 99% integer and one row is a string, there may be some intervention that you have to do there. But again, it's trying to take most of that heavy lifting away from you. So for our viewers, if you haven't tried this is a real simple architecture, and it's overlooked so much, but it can be really powerful to get you started on your data journey. Casey, any thoughts on this? I know you deal with this as well.
Yeah, the crawlers are really good, good starting point, but you do have to, as you said, watch out for some of their categorizations, especially int, because they will, sometimes they will just choose int when you really need a long or big int, in this case. So, and as you said, the strings and all of that. So it's just essentially sanity checking it, but it gives you a really, really good starting point. One of the ones I did want to go over is, because you mentioned that you use Power BI and Tableau, how do you actually get those two BI tools talking to Athena?
Yeah. So I think Athena's JDBC drivers have been quite useful for Zuru here, because it allows those external tools. But yeah, Luke, do you want to talk to that? How you guys kind of went about getting that going?
Yeah, this was a little bit of a longer process than I thought it was going to be as well. Quite a bit of figuring out, but basically for Tableau, there's just some drivers and stuff that you need to essentially install to get it all working. But it's not super clear on how you do that. Like there's not like there's a lot of different information on guides and stuff like that. Once you find the right guide and you kind of work it out, it takes like 2 minutes. It's super simple, and then from there, it's just as simple as connecting it up to Athena and piping in the data like that.
Yep.
So the overall process is actually really simple. It just was a little bit tricky, at least from my perspective. I mean, I'm not a data engineer or anything like that. I usually just run machine learning models and leave it at that. But there were a couple of little quirks that we had kind of worked through to get that all working. So what is really a 5-minute job probably took us like an hour. But yeah, it is very simple.
Awesome. And was it the same for Power BI as well? Like, do you use desktop or cloud?
I believe we use the cloud. So we're in the kind of process of transitioning to Power BI at the moment. There's a few quirks there as well, like with getting people access and stuff like that outside that we're working with Nero at the moment to get done. But yeah, more or less the same process.
Yeah, and I think one of the key points there we've been talking about is you need a Power BI gateway deployed, so that if you want to sort of send it across your business and people are using it in the cloud, it needs to be able to access your data source back down in terms of where it is. But Athena does work through that as well, and we're in the middle of solving that for Zuru, but it's more a deployment thing than a how do you do it thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the things that going into it, we didn't actually realize. So we thought it was as simple as chuck the data in Power BI and just, send the link out basically. And then we found, actually, no, you can't access that. So that's just one of those things, but yeah.
Yeah, because it works locally on your Power BI.
Exactly.
Then when you publish it, it needs the data. So that, yeah. But hey, picking up on something you said, Luke. So yeah, it is interesting that fundamentally you are a data scientist looking at modeling, looking at that complex side, but obviously stepping into the fact that you want your data. You're not, you move fast, you do what you have to do. How was that in terms of using? I know you used Glue. I know you used the visual editor a little bit. Not ideally what you want to be doing, but like, what was your experience with that? And also, I guess you're used to Python as a data scientist, so I assume that helped because you can jump into the code in Glue as well.
Exactly. I mean, that's right. I'm not an engineer, so that, I mean, I have a little bit of experience and background in it, but not enough to build out something overly complex or anything. But that's really where Glue and AWS is kind of excels at. I don't really have those skills, but it's quite an easy process that I was able to pick it up. And you in Glue, you can just about pick whatever language you want. And I mean, just about everybody in the world knows Python now. So that was a very, very easy transition for me. I have experience transforming data and stuff in Python and whatnot. So it wasn't really overly difficult to kind of transition into that. I could process it in the native language that I like to use and stuff like that. So yeah, it's got challenges, but it's also quite simple at the same time. You don't really need this big fancy team and stuff with all these different skill sets. If you're willing to learn and you've got some technical knowledge at least, you can kind of scale up from there and learn quite quickly, which is quite cool. And yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah. I really want to dive into let's leave AWS and the platform side, right? I think
okay.
is so exciting, and honestly, it's my journey with you guys that have given me a little bit of depth in this. And if we start with, you guys spend, I won't assume, we won't talk about exact numbers, but you guys must be spending millions of dollars in your advertising. So knowing where to put that money and what's more impactful than other channels, for example, this is a very, very common theme across a lot of customers. And I find this really fascinating how you do that. So I was wondering, can we dive into a little bit about modeling, very generally, very high level? Let's get our audience across what you do in that space. Now, I've come across mixed media modeling after working with you guys and have been reading a lot about this, right? And it's so interesting how we're trying to attribute the effect of advertising to yourself. The other thing I know as an amateur in this area is, I mean, we're starting to go into a very privacy enforced era, right? Cookieless era. There was a big change, especially with Apple and some of those devices stopping you from being able to track people. And it's really seems to have pivoted this area in marketing analytics because it's harder to do attribution directly down to a user. And so it feels like mixed media modeling is now starting to take precedence again in terms of a better way to find what's going on. So I thought let's start a little bit by explaining what is mixed media modeling and how does that kind of work?
For sure. I guess to give kind of a high level overview of it, like we were saying, or I was saying earlier, we know marketing has an impact on sales, but we don't know how much or, what those contributing factors necessarily are and stuff like that. So it's basically a way of working out the contribution of each like external and internal factors. So, primarily, at least for us, it's, TikTok and Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that. We want to know, well, how much did our ads on or our spend on TikTok really affect sales and stuff like that. We can then get quite fancy with it. Like, for example, a bunch of balloons. We know people aren't going to buy that when it's, raining outside and stuff, but we don't really know how much of an impact weather's having on it. So we can also use these triple M's to basically work out, well, how much effect does the weather actually have? How much does that actually contribute to sales and stuff like that? So yeah, it's a simple concept. It's difficult to execute. These things aren't, I wouldn't say new, but in this kind of new era of privacy that we're kind of heading into, triple M's have really started to pop up and get a lot of notice and attention recently, because it is a way to kind of, we can't track our customers anymore, but we can kind of work out how much each channel is contributing to overall sales. So it's quite a powerful tool in that sense. But yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. I guess if we had to picture that, you've got, that you'll have some sales regardless of what you do. So if we call that base sales, then let's say you're spending some money on TikTok, you're spending some money on Instagram, etc. How does that really get down to saying this is more impactful than the other? Is it based on some sort of trend? I mean, it's probably trying to do something a little bit more advanced than that, right?
Yeah, and there's different packages out there that do it different ways, but essentially it's taking the variations in spend and stuff like that, and impressions and whatnot, and kind of working out as it sees those variations, how has that changed sales and whatnot. But yeah, there's different ways that you can do it. It is pretty simple, at least in a top line. Basically, sales equals various different factors. You've got your trend and seasonality as kind of a baseline of where sales is going to be without any digital, anything. And then on top of that, it's like, well, how much did you spend on this? How much did you spend on that channel? And you can put factors in like unemployment, consumer confidence. You could even account for COVID and stuff like that, and see what impact that's actually having on sales. But yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So you got your base sales. You've got some sort of trend factor, seasonality, obviously, when you've got Black Friday sales or something like that.
Exactly.
But then there is that attribution of how much you put into each of your marketing channels that will start impacting it.
Yep.
And then I guess there's a little bit of an error percentage there as well.
Exactly.
In terms of have you got it right within a certain margin to get
exactly, and that's kind of the whole goal is you rerun these models, you add in new features, and you work a little bit of magic to try and get that error rate as low as possible, basically.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things we talked about is everyone, I think, or at least I used to say, data-driven organization means you set up your data pipelines, you have your insights, and you blindly follow your insights kind of thing. But in reality, especially for a business that has done so well on, and I don't mean this in a bad way, gut feel and people's understanding, right? I guess it's also important to facilitate a way to, add your own opinion onto the result of that. And so I think it's been quite interesting saying, okay, we've got these models. So the data platform or the architecture we talked about has obviously helped get the information you need to do this kind of modeling. The other side of this is, I suppose, the future and how you can present that back to the business and still give them the ability to, add their own variables and manipulate that data and see what the outcomes are like. And I think that's a really interesting challenge that you've got for the future.
Yeah, 100%. It is quite. It's not a holy grail, It's good to kind of advise strategy and stuff like that, but ultimately, our brand managers know their brands very well. So there is kind of, I guess it's an iterative process. You kind of feed in these variables, you get your models, and then you kind of need to sense check them, and work with the brand teams to work out like, well, does that actually make sense? Like, do we actually think TikTok has is contributing 90% to sales? Like, maybe that doesn't quite make sense for this brand and stuff like that. Maybe we're missing different factors, or and stuff like that. And they're never, we don't take them as basically a source of truth. They're there to maybe drive conversation and drive change and strategy. We don't just blindly follow these things. It's like it might tell us, well, one channel is better than the other and stuff like that. So we might go out and we might test that to be sure. It's kind of just one piece of the overall kind of puzzle when it comes to digital strategy. Yeah,
that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about the future. What are you most excited about testing out, trialing kind of next? Like, are you thinking, start looking at more modeling, AI, ML, or is it more in the space of different kinds of, testing and etc.?
Well, we've got some pretty big plans. The perk of Zuru is that we move really quickly, which is exciting. So, to start out, we're trialing just about every AI ML tool that's coming out. Obviously generative AI is a hot topic at the moment, especially within our business. We want to know where can we use these tools to add, the most value. and we've got some, probably can share, you know, a little bit, but we want to use kind of machine learning to start analyzing our creative and stuff like that, and potentially generate creative and or at least aid in kind of the production process of it. So we've got some cool things in the works there. We also have, you know, so many different brands that are all quite different to each other. So they kind of all require different kind of strategies and stuff like that. So, you know, this, for example, Triple M's, they're not going to fit every single brand. They take a lot of work to get the variables that, you know, work for that brand. So definitely in the future, we want to have every single brand modeled out. Takes a lot of data and clean data at that. So we're working on that at the moment, for sure. Loads of things that we want to test. You know, we want to test what channels work for different brands, and, you know, what messaging works the best for different brands. We've got ways of testing, you know, age groups and, you know, different demographics and different areas and stuff like that. There's a lot of testing that we want to do in the future, which we're pretty excited for.
It's good, probably a good segue. Can we talk a little bit about GeoLift? Is that?
Yep, definitely.
Experimentation testing, right?
Yeah, this is probably the part that I love most about the business, I'd say. It's pretty exciting. It's kind of like, I guess an easy way to explain it might be like, it's kind of like an A/B test on steroids. So the idea is super simple, you know, take it back to year 7 science and stuff like that. You've got a group, you've got 2 groups, you've got one that you apply some sort of change to, and then you know, you've got your control. So we basically take that concept and blow it up to, you know, an entire, you know, national level. So for example, and there's open source packages to do this. We basically feed in sales data and pick cells based on that that data that correlate closely to basically create like a treatment group. And then based off that, we create things that are called augmented synthetic controls. Basically, it's just a machine learning way of creating a control group. Very cool. A lot of cool math that goes involved. Definitely worth checking out. But essentially, we pick a bunch of, you know, locations in the States or something like that that we want to test different things. So say we might have one group that we want to test Facebook only in, and then another that we want to test TikTok in, and then another with YouTube. We basically run ads just in those locations, and they're, you know, spread out geographically. And then essentially we compare that afterwards to the control group to see how much, you know, lift we get in sales. It kind of goes hand in hand with the Triple M. So we can, you know, feed in the data from the Triple M, you know, our assumptions from that model into these tests and actually get real results. And typically these, you know, it takes a lot of money and a lot of setup to, you know, run these tests. But we're proving time and time again that it's actually quite achievable. You know, we do these on quite comparatively to, you know, bigger brands, quite small budgets, and we're seeing, you know, crazy results. You know, for different brands, we now know what, you know, platform works the best, and, you know, it's in the terms of, you know, driving sales and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, also because I have a background in the marketing automation and all of this stuff, so it's quite interesting. I also know that the SMBs that might have a presence in multiple countries and stuff, they will run the same campaign across multiple different, like, you know, avenues like Facebook, Instagram, etc. And but the code that they'll give the end user will be slightly different. And that's then they can actually see where the each particular user and each demographic generally resides, and then they'll tailor subsequent messaging to that particular demographic. So you can get quite smart, and also because they know all the codes correlate, once they use one code, they'll cancel all the other codes, so they can't build it. And that's another way that you can get a lot of information with just that 2 data points.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, I mean, you can test just about everything. At the moment, we mainly focus on like what platforms drive sales, but you can, maybe you've got 5 different types of creative, different ads and stuff like that, and you just want to test which one's working the best. You can do that. It really, whatever you can imagine, just about you can test doing this method. So it's pretty cool, and we want to get quite creative with the things that we're testing in the future, and also scaling it out. So at the moment, we mainly do United States. We've also done them in Canada, but we want to scale them out and be able to do these in the UK, even Australia and New Zealand and stuff, which bring their own challenges and whatnot. But yeah, it's very cool.
Diving into the tech on that one a little bit, I think it's really fascinating how a lot of the modeling and statistical experimentation stuff that you can find out there in this space leverages R. And
yep.
I always find that interesting. Having a software engineering background, R is almost my don't go there. And so diving into the tech of some of the open source stuff you guys were using there, Luke, in terms of the experimentation, or what we call GeoLift, it was really interesting. So this is, I guess, where I will bring AWS back into the place, where we were really trying to help Luke scale that out in terms of running it faster, right? So the more experiments you can run, the more insights you have in a shorter period of time, and you can feed that back into the business. And we were looking at one of the GeoLift experiments that was taking 30 plus hours to get them a result. And I guess this is where sometimes, you just do want to say, okay, there's no perfect architecture here, ideally perfectly. We'd have gone in there and see how can you distribute this across like a high performance compute cluster and get that down, etc. But in this case, we kind of experimented with a really simple brute force method, right? We took it and we shoved that into a single virtual instance on EC2 that had 192 cores to see how fast we could get it going. And interesting journey, right? Because that's when you start understanding some of the things that's in the code that you didn't want to look at. And in this case, we found that R, just R, the standard open source package, actually has a variable inside of it saying, I will only ever use 112 CPUs ever. It's hard-coded variable. Not quite sure who decided that was where, potentially because R has been around for a long time and they didn't quite see like
nobody thought they'd be crazy enough to try it.
Yeah, so we had a great time like recompiling R to get vertical scaling going as fast as we could to see, hey, is there a quick and dirty method to get this time down? And yeah, I thought that was quite interesting, and also the modeling stuff that we talked about before also leverages R quite a bit. So it's interesting, especially for data scientists such as yourselves, because I feel like you're sitting on the Python camp, and then there's R aside. But how do you feel about the R packages though? Are you kind of starting to learn R, or do you know R already, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd learned R in the past, not really by choice, just kind of fell into that. They're for the most part quite transferable, Python and R. R feels a little bit restrictive, I guess. So like for the GeoLift code, that's all in R, but being a Python boy, I basically just transferred it into Python so that I didn't have to actually write R, and I could just run it all in one notebook and stuff like that. I mean, some people prefer R, but I don't know why. But yeah, I mean, yeah, both have benefits, I guess. As a data scientist, R's pretty popular. But yeah, I think we'll probably see these things move to Python in the future.
R is generally more popular because it should be more optimized, and like it should do a lot more automatic optimization. So larger larger processors should utilize more of your multi-threaded capability.
Interesting.
clearly not past 112 parallelizations in a single error.
That being said, if you've, I don't think Python would even survive 8 cores, let alone 100.
We'll make it happen.
And also a great one. What about Perl or Lisp?
Oh, same here.
First of all, if you're trying to force someone to use Perl, like you're a sadist at heart. Lisp, I believe, is still very, very common in academia, and people like also using it to write self-mutating viruses.
Interesting. So what?
Self-mutating viruses. They are. It's an awesome thing, and it's a rabbit hole you can get down. But essentially, as the code is running, it's actually rewriting itself. So it was like essentially write as malicious code. So antiviruses to get around antivirus and stuff, run it, and then rewrite itself back, or to a different version of like code that doesn't or isn't nefarious at all. So it's really hard to track down what caused the breach.
That is brilliant. Awful, but brilliant.
That's amazing. Like when you get into that area of things, and you also can abuse how jars are read. So images are read left to right on the disk, and jars are read right to left. So what you can do is you can actually concatenate the two, and then in code you can actually load and run an image, because you're essentially just running the jar. So you can hide code that way.
Interesting.
Perl as a system admin language. You know, I've got to say, 14 years, I have not come across Perl. I know it's there. I know some things use it, but I have actually not come across it directly. It's an interesting one. Maybe if you guys have.
No, I mean, for me, being in data science, it's Python or R just about. But yeah.
So I haven't used myself. I know Perl. If you are used in the Oracle ecosystem space, then you'll probably be forced to use it. And then there's also the famous Perl Sudoku solver, which is like just one line of like gibberish. I'm trying to see if I can find it, but yeah, Perl is a very interesting language.
My go-to, this is totally just going off topic here, but my go-to these days is learning Rust, because I think it's definitely got potential. I don't know if you guys have dived into it yet, but what you get on it over C+, because it's a little bit easier, versus the performance you still get is just amazing. If you guys haven't tried it out, you should, especially in the context of using like serverless stuff like AWS Lambda and stuff like that. It's my pet little project at the moment to learn it. It is a big difference in paradigm for me, because I'm coming from Python or Java or C#, and that's a bit more higher level. So some concepts, the safety, the type safety, etc., is different. But yeah, I'm having quite a bit of fun getting into that at the moment.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's why I love Python. I guess it's like, in my opinion, probably one of the easiest to learn. You know, at least to me, it makes sense. Some of the others out there are just wild. But yeah, interesting.
In the past, I've done a little bit of a comparison on them in terms of which one should a company adopt. And, you know, there's just never like this is the right answer for everyone. But it is interesting when you start getting viewpoints and preferences and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm a firm believer of using whatever you're kind of, you know, most comfortable with. So for us, you know, we're pretty kind of flexible of what you want to write your stuff in. For the most time, it's Python, but you know.
What one interesting segue out of that code, right, is I find it interesting the lack of codified ways to recreate dashboards, whether that be in Power BI, Tableau, or even QuickSight, right? And there are some ways to do it, don't get me wrong, but it is interesting, right? But all the trends we've seen, infrastructure as code, even for cloud resourcing, I still yet to see something mature that works really well in that space. And I feel like with a lot of companies like yourselves at Zuru moving into, being data-driven, adopting analytics and BI tools, that it's missing from the puzzle. Or have I just missed something? Have you guys seen anything interesting in that space?
Not personally, but yeah, that is interesting.
Another a topic for the future.
Yeah, definitely.
No, but going over the fact that programming languages are quite a personal topic, and that's why I also think that developers will fight tooth and nail to defend their favorite language. But one of the great things that like using managed services like Lambda, for example, is that you can actually use a language for its strengths. Like C#, Python, JavaScript all have different strengths. Like my favorite example is if you are trying to manipulate a PDF in C#, like it is pretty much only really restricted licensing, or like you have to purchase a license for it to get anything that's good. But if you go Python, well, you can just use like an open source Python manipulator and pretty much do everything you want in 5 minutes. And that really annoyed me when I found it out, because I spent like 6 hours trying to do it. And then I was like, fine, I'll go to Python, and it took me like 30 minutes. So that's what's the advantages of being able to understand and use multiple languages and understand its strengths and what its ecosystem is. And Nero, man, you're too popular.
I've been kicked out of my office. I'm in another room, and I can't shut that thing down.
That's all his customers that have fires that he needs to put out.
It's everyone messaging me, asking me about GeoLift and Triple M's, mate.
Oh, nice. Oh, perfect.
And also, one question to throw under the bus, Nero. Do you want to explain what regex is?
Do I want to explain what regex is? Oh man, no, I don't. I can't articulate my head. Damn, this is where we need some generative AI.
Regex are awesome, and also the bane of everyone's existence. Obviously, a regular expression. So it is a language in itself, but it is used to define the characteristics of a I would say string. It doesn't necessarily have to be a string, but it makes sense in that context. So you would define that, hey, this string needs to match this expression, which would be saying any letter between A to capital Z, so that's lowercase all the way through to your capitals, and it's either going to match once or multiple times. And then you can say after that, I am expecting a number between 1 and 9, or you can say 1 and 5, to match either once or multiple times. Or you can say that number might actually doesn't even have to be there. And if it's not there, then it has to have like another letter like F, for example, like very explicit. So you can get very, very detailed about your parsing requirements, and it is used exclusively for parsing. I had to deal with it when I was writing a parsing language for my master's. Yeah.
So you wrote a parsing language for your master's, and you're asking me to explain regex. Come on.
I said I'm going to throw you under the bus. Yeah, and as cypherpunk, the concept, the actual debugging of regex is a nightmare. Like, just don't even get started there.
Another angle joining our little segue conversation on programming languages, the performance of regex libraries across Python versus C# versus Java is also an interesting one. And again, if memory serves me correctly, Python's got a pretty good one again, in terms of if you're kind of going over large volumes of data and stuff like that.
Yep. I think JavaScript's performance is heavily dependent on the underlying engine, because you have the Chrome V8 engine, I believe it is called. It's been a while since I've looked into JavaScript, so my memory's probably a little bit dodgy.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm one of those guys. JavaScript,
Yeah, likewise.
TypeScript away.
Gotta do it for what it's worth. But hey, maybe it's time to just wrap up a little bit and say, look, thanks so much for coming on the show and like being open to talking about it and stuff like that. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate you like being upfront about what works and what's not. That's what this show's about.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was lots of fun. Hopefully, it was interesting and informative. But yeah, love to come back on and maybe do more of a deep dive, maybe something a little bit more technical, and get into it.
Yeah,
that would be awesome if you could come back and do a deep dive later in the year, especially once you've done all those iterations that you talked about.
Absolutely.
And I second that. Thank you very much for coming online. Just to wrap up, we do have a New Zealand technical AWS technical community, which I'm going to link in now chat. So do feel free to join that group. We normally post things that are happening in New Zealand, but also if you are wanting to learn more about or are interested in a particular topic, a great way for to communicate to us to essentially talk about that topic is to go there and just post and ask for it. And also thank you for everyone that got involved and through those questions into chat. It's been a awesome and wonderful time, and I'm sure Luke and Nero agree.
100%.
Yeah, amazing great questions. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, and with that, Matiwa.